I got up as usual, say my prayers, had my breakfast, and I think I read a scripture. My grandson insisted that I got dressed early, and I started getting dressed for the party. Well, I thought the party was gorgeous, was wonderful. And I thank God just to let me live to see that day, 100 years, which I never thought. I didn't have no idea that I would live to be 100 years old. So I said, God be the glory for letting me live to see March 1st, 2014. It was a beautiful day with all my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and friends and relatives. I was born in Georgetown, South Carolina, right here on the North Merriman Road. Now, I don't know no address at that time. It wasn't no address. A ditch on both sides, and then a lot of bushes and wildflowers. That was a wooded, bushy area. But crops of people would plant their garden or their field. And then over there where the hospital at, that's where the farm was. Then down the highway was a farm too. My father lived in one area and my mother lived in another. When I was coming up, my mother lived on Broad Street. And my father lived down, I think it was on Meeting Street. He had a family. He worked for the government on the film, USS Watery, I think, some big government boat. I remember two places my mother worked. She worked for the Fogels, and she worked for Miss Dundas. They had a jewel place. And as far as I could remember, they had one child. Seemed like that was a girl, and her name was Leola. My mother was married, and afterward, she moved to Florida. She and her husband moved to Tampa, Florida. I was up in age and a young girl then. But my grandmother and my uncle reared me. Oh, she was an old lady, and she smoked a pipe. And she used to like to sit with her leg crossed. And she wore an apron. And she had a special place she liked to sit on the porch. She had belonged to Bethel Church, but she attended Honor because it was close. She had a sewing machine, and she used to, well, she didn't sew for me, but she sewed for her children when they were coming up, because I heard her was talking about a Singer. That was a Singer sewing machine, the treadle type, which I still have. First, my uncle was a mechanic. He was a mechanic, and he had a business on High Market Street. It was a long building, and a grocery store was on the corner, and I think the man that ran that store name was Robin. And then it was a line of stores, and what they had that place where the WPA used to make mattress. Miss Britt used to work there. And that garage was right on the other side. And he worked there. And after he closed that down, he built a garage on Merriman Road. When I was coming up, he had a store right on the corner of this Merriman Road and what now is Legion Street. But we didn't call it Legion Street. It was the alley. And the store was a double apartment, like one side had the sweets, like the Coca-Cola and your sweets and your drinks and stuff like that. And the other side was a grocery store, And his name was Jake Brown. I went to school, the Howard School there on the corner of Duke and King. That's where the Howard building was, Howard School. We used to call it Howard High School. And there were, let me see now, it was the school, the big building, and then a building behind that was a yellow building. And the yellow building was on King Street. I believe that building was an upstairs building, but downstairs is where they had classes, and there were 3 classrooms in that building. Our home ec teacher was Amelia Atkinson, and that was in a building right across from the school, in a 2-story building. I mean, that building name was Baruch Hall. Oh, Lord, yes. We had to walk to school, and we would go down Merriman Road, and when we get to Duke Street, you could straight down to Howard School. Straight down. And if you were late and the bell rang, we'd start trotting. But, and then sometime we would cut across a field. And it seemed like it was a cemetery before that highway was cut through there, until they removed that cemetery. Then it seemed like it was a horse stable right there where that dentist's office was.
Dr. Davis?
Davis' office, it seemed like it was a horse stable there. But it was a lot of oak trees. My first grade teacher was Miss Janie Ward, because she was in the end on the King Street side. And then one teacher was Professor Thompson, R.A. Thompson, because he lived right there by the school. And then Miss Ella Beck was one of my teachers, Maurice Kelly, and one name was Miss Fair, and Miss White. Well, the more thing we did, we would jump rope. That was one of the things we did. And like if you played outside, okay, you have some little can, you say you was cooking, you had your little dirt, you stirred and just say you was cooking. My uncle, oh, in that yard we had pear trees, and then he had ducks, and he had a little thing built for those ducks. I must have been in about 4th or 5th grade then. But we were ditches on both sides of this road, and it was a dirt road. And in the evening time, we would turn the ducks out their little place, and they would go in the ditch, because there was always water in the ditch. And I would be on the side of the road watching the ducks in the ditch until they decide they had enough of the ditch, and they would come out. And there was a place nearby, was a low place, it wasn't a pond, but it was a low area, and it always had more water. The water was more than the ditch because it was wide, and they'd get over there. And then when time to come back home, we had a time getting them out there. We had cows, chicken, had cows. No, one was Blackie and one was Beck. Yeah, one was Butt. And in those days, they had, let me see now, they had something they called the dip. When you take the cow to the dip, it was water. They had some kind of disinfectant in that water, and they had to go down. They would take them to a place, and they would go down in that water with some kind of disinfectant for tick. And they go down and then come out. And the stores they were lined up on the two sides like they are now, but they, not near advanced. Because there was a Eisman drugstore on one side and the Eaton drugstore. Now, from my going, Eisman was on the right side and Eaton was on the left side. That was near, Eisman drugstore was in the area where Fogel was. But you would get to the Kaminsky hardware, that was like the beginning of the stores, if my memory serves me correctly. It was after you passed the post office. That big building over there on Front Street, that was the post office, and the post office had a revolving door, because a lot of time after we grew up and you're going to take pictures, we used to go behind the post office and take pictures. Very tough time, but it was a tough time, but I didn't find it to be too tough a time because my uncle had a store. There was a building somewhere downtown, down on the other end of town, and it was like a warehouse or something. It used to call Brickman Warehouse, and they used to make casket or something. My uncle worked there. My Uncle Jake worked there. Because I remember well the name. I never knew the person, but I knew he did say the building was a Brickman place, and that way he was working. That's before he went to the mill. The mill That was like you was in a ditch and someone pulled you out. Yes, the International Paper Company. That's when the people started working at the mill. A lot of people got joined there. And then too, it was a war going on because, well, that's way up then, because women were working at the box mill, because I worked at the box mill. But there were hard days. Over there was a wooded area, but it wasn't a thickly wooded area. Because at one point, the boys used to play golf over there. Then, afterward, the airplanes started landing over there. But we still used to call that, then when the airplanes start landing over there, what is now Legion Street, we used to call it the airport Street. You didn't hear about Legion Street. North Congdon and Palm Street, you didn't hear that. Like Congdon was North Congdon Street, Palm Street. That's before that highway was built. You didn't hear that. It was Vineyard Heights. That whole section over there was Vineyard Heights. And you could count the houses that were there. Everybody knew everybody. There weren't that many houses there. Because I know sometimes, like it's rough weather, we could sit on our front porch. We had a swing on the porch, and you could hear the ocean roll. You could hear the ocean roll. That was before that highway was built. Because there wasn't nothing to keep the sounding back. And then my grandma would say, oh, the ocean is rough. It's rough tonight, or it's rough today. I didn't finish high school. In high school, I think I dropped out of high school in the 9th grade, if I'm not mistaken. 10th grade, and I got married. And when they were building that highway, those men was working over, you had to cross that river to go over there where they've been cutting bushes, and they would go like Monday, and then they would come back home Friday evening. And I think they stayed in tents. They must be sleep on the ground or something, I don't know. Didn't have all these bridges or nothing. It was a ferry boat. Seemed like one of those boat names was the Pelican. No, I don't remember riding on the ferry, but I remember was in a rowboat one time when my oldest child, must be about 2 or 3, I went over. At that time, you used to go to C.L. Ford's store if you was going over to Baruch Place and in that area, and then somebody would pick you up in a rowboat and take you across, because I remember going to my grandfather, and he lived on Baruch Place, and I must have stayed there with them like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I came out back home. But you go a ferry, and what the man named, the man that used to take people from Baruch to C.L. Ford, because that's where all those people from. I had 6. The first baby died, I think it was about 2 months old. But the rest of them, they all grew up to be grown, with the exception of my baby son, my youngest son, my baby son. See, because they all went to school, and each one graduated from Howard School. But wait a minute, before Woodrow, the youngest one, when he first started the school, he went to Howard, and I think he must have been there a week. And I'd take him out and put him on Palm Street. There was a school there they called the Rosemount School, because to cross the highway, and that's when they had those lights, it was dangerous, because our children had to get across the best way they could, but you all, the cops were there to help you all over. Right over there, the building is there now. See, first he was in Rosemount Plantation, and then they built a place out there, and it was right on Palm Street, not about a block or two from here. And he went, I forgot how long Woodrow been there until he went to Howard. I don't know if he went there 2 or 3 years, but he went to Howard. And that's where the tragedy struck. See, but all of my children graduated from high school, but Woodrow. Woodrow died the week before his graduation. You might have heard about a tragedy in that craft place over there. I think that was the first incident. That's where he died. He got in trouble in that water. I could remember going to the health department too. That's where the midwives used to have their meeting. And that's where I got to say I was on my way. I think we used to have a meeting the 3rd Thursday in every month. But back to that, and the young man that lived right next door, as I was on my way, he called me. He said, "Miss Sugar, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the health department." He said, "Don't go to the health department. Go to the hospital, because Woodrow almost drowned." And that was in 1960, I remember that. Because we moved in this house Thanksgiving 1959. It was May when the tragedy, and that was the week before graduation from high school. And we had just gotten back when that happened. We had just gotten back a few days from one of my daughter's graduation from Tuskegee Institute. Then, but it's Tuskegee University now. All the rest graduated from Howard School. And at that time, they used to have the graduation to different church. If they had the graduation one year to Bethel, the next year they would have it at Bethesda. All the children graduate from Howard School. Donella, Henry Howard, Marilyn, Eva, and then Woody. We used to have to go to the Institute every 4 years, but we would have meeting here once a month. And who were in charge? Miss Exran and Miss that's at the health department.
Generette.
Huh?
Generette.
And Miss Generette. But in that building now, I do remember Miss Rouse used to work there, and there was somebody named Miss Johnson worked there. But I don't know if they had anything to do with the nurses. That's where they used to keep all the records and stuff. But you had to go every 4 years to be certified. And they would go to class. Well, one year I think we went to Columbia, and one year we went to Beaufort. Not Columbia, something, because we went to Morris College. You had to wear uniform. They grade you, and after a while they start giving you like A and B on those certificates. But one thing with them, I'll say this, they never spell my is like I tell them. Never. You see, at that time, a white person didn't want to have it, so a black person tell them how to spell something. And every year I got my certificate, my is it spelled wrong, but when I first went in there, it's right. But after that, they spell them just like they want to spell them, not like how I spell them. To this day, there's a lot of confusion with my is it. A lot of my work, I didn't do too much midwife, what you call midwifery, whatever. I used to do aftercare. Like you go and have a baby, when time for you to go home, I would be with you just how many days you want me. Most likely to be like a week or 2 weeks. But I remember it was one case I was on over that road, over on the west hand side, and Reverend Bowles seemed like he was over the welfare, and this person was on welfare. And it was in an area where some people used to live. They used to call them Cow Daddy. It's somewhere across that road next to Gilbert Street, Manuel Street area. And I remember well, that woman had a baby, and she did not, possibly didn't do what she was supposed to do, and she said Dr. Miller was her doctor, and Dr. Miller came. But I tell you, some of the houses over in that area at that time, it seemed like you could step off the porch and step into the restroom. It just seemed like that. Now that was the time when you see a lot of beans and this and that in the houses. That's what what I be there so I could teach them how to bathe the baby and how to feed the baby and burp the baby, and I'll be there at least mostly like 2 weeks. We used to wear a blue uniform, and it had a white collar, and the sleeve had a white on the sleeve. And when we first started off with the midwifery, we had those big white aprons, like a pinafore. And during that time, okay, when we were doing that midwife, every year in January, the people from Columbia would come to the health department, and that's the time we used to call it, we used to have the Christmas party that particular day. We'd have a big dinner when the nurses and different ones come down from Columbia. I don't remember if it was the first or second week, but it was always in January. Before they built that health department, Miss Mary Resort had a building they used to teach school in, and we used to call that something hall. I wonder if that building was with our health department, or it was just, they used to teach school somewhere, and they had a classroom somewhere in that area. The building had belonged to Miss Mary Resort, and I know a fifth grade class, I remember a fifth grade class was in there because Charles Brown taught that fifth grade. But I was up to Howard in Miss Fair room. Miss Fair taught fifth grade. Fair and Sadie White. Well, as they grew up and finished school, they went away because they had an aunt in New York, and they went there. My oldest son, he went into service. Donnell went to New York, and she went to Oakwood College in Huntsville, Alabama. And that year, I went school closed instead of coming home. That's when she went to New York to her aunt. Then, who was next to graduate? Henry Howard. Henry Howard and Marilyn graduated the same year. Henry Howard went into service. She went to New York. And then I've been sending her the catalog from the different colleges so she could enroll in college. No catalog you sent this lady, she had like this school. So I finally tell her, I said, B, it was when she got the one from Tuskegee, she said she liked that. I said, be here. I gave her the time to be here. And I said, bring all your clothes. And when she arrived, she put in her application for Tuskegee. But even May said she wasn't going to no college. Woodrow said he was going to go because he didn't want to work with delinquent children. But he never made it. He died before that. But she went. When my grandchildren started coming, my first grand was born in what year?
65.
65? Huh?
Yeah. That's
April? Yeah, in 65. And I was working on, at that time I was working on a Acacia plantation. And I got a leave of absence. I came home when I was with my grandbaby. I was due for about 2 weeks.
a little longer than that.
2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and then I went back. I have 9 grandchildren, but do not ask me how many great-grand, because I'll have to count my fingers and toes. My church, I grew up in Sunday school, and we went to church. There was a lot of time when I would go to church. You would, if my grandmother would be home, but you would go to church with somebody out the neighborhood, because you see, I was maybe about a block from the church, maybe not a block. So, and then I grew up in the church, because at one point I used to be the secretary of the Sunday school. That's way back when I was young. And then after you grow up in the church and you be involved in the church work, I was assistant clerk at one time. And then they had a club, the WSOC club, I was a member of that. And we had a group we called the Pulpit Aid. All that was working with the church. Missionary. I used to be the secretary of the missionary. And then I used to be assistant class leader for class number 2. And what else? I sang on the senior choir. And I'm the president of the Rutledge Graham Stewardess Board. And that a position I had held for years. I used to be the chairperson for the church anniversary. The church anniversary, Founders Day. Well, just about every organization in the church when I was young, I was active in. From here to what we call downtown, when we was coming up, each looked like each group was to themselves. The group from downtown was to themselves. The group here was to themselves. And on that west end, we used to call it over the road. That's right. And, but the only time you used to associate was when you go to school. Each group stayed to themselves. But I had a few friends downtown because, you see, my father lived down there. And whenever I go down there, I would always see some of the others from school and like that. I had a few friends down there, but each group was associated until, you know, years after we come along. When that group, they come along, it was a different way of life. But it looked like each group used to stay to themselves until they start to have the place where the children used to go for well, I would say enjoyment. That's when they start actually mingling, as to my knowledge. And you see, you used to wash people's clothes and iron them. And you go to the house and pick up their clothes and bring them back and wash them and iron them and take them back. And then some of them would bring it and pick it up. But you had a lot to do. Bean farm, to pick beans. When we was growing up, it was the bean farm. And the children, at a certain time when there was beans start growing, those children would go on the farm to pick beans. But I couldn't go. I couldn't go. My uncle wouldn't let me go. Right here on the Merriman Road. We lived about a block apart. When they've been working over there, cleaning that highway over there, we had to go across the river on a ferry boat. And I remember one time the story came out, oh, the ferry boat sank, the ferry boat sank. I don't know what had happened, but it wasn't true. It wasn't true. Everybody weeping and wailing, but it wasn't true. But now that was the tough time when they've been doing that kind of work, because they sleep in tent, so you know how that was. And he said, the clothes you carry, what you sleep in that the whole week. If you don't change till you get back home. They had to be down to that ferry a certain time on Monday morning to go back to work. Because the men used to dig ditch, and they used to clean these land and different things. At that time, there was a lot of some furniture store. You go and you buy things. If you get things, like you get these stuff in here, you pay a certain amount down, and then you pay monthly, or weekly, mostly monthly. And I remember before we moved in this house, we had a fireplace where we were, and the craft used to, when winter come, they used to sell coal, because he would get like a ton of coal or 2 tons of coal, because it was in the chimney, in the fireplace, he had a grate, and that's where we would burn that down. Plus, he had a heater. What did you call those heaters? Anyway, you had a tank built, and then you had your heater connected up like that, and your oil would go to the heater. It was kerosene, because you had a drum set up on the side, you had something built, and had a drum set up, and that's how much. And you would have that truck to deliver that kerosene to a certain time, and when you run low, you call and they'd come and fill it up again. There was a place you used to go, I think it was on Prince Street. You used to go and pick up the carbolic on Saturday. That was your disinfectant for you. They call, see the outdoor toilet, they used to call them outdoor privy. Then another thing, when those toilets get too full, it was a man they used to get to do what they call sink the toilet. Ain't that something? And you didn't even have a pump. It used to be whale. And then when you leave the whale, you start having the pump. Then the next thing you know, you had running water. But you had to pay a certain amount to the city to get on the runner, to get a permit for your running water. Yeah, you used to hang clothes. You didn't hear about no dryer, no washing machine. It was the washboard. And then when you, after your washing machine was a tall thing, and you put your clothes in there and turn them on. It wasn't like these one you have now. You see, these came along later. And another thing used to happen. You hang your clothes on the clothesline, and it looked like a lot of times, as soon as you get all them pretty white clothes, because you had a big old wash pot. You put those white clothes in there, and you put different things on it, and you put a fire on it, and you boil it, and then you take it out and finish washing. And time you get to sometimes just you get that line string with the white clothes, here comes the line to the ground. Pop. You got to start all over again, and you didn't turn on no water. You had to draw water from a well. And then some of the people, sometimes they had a drum. They start getting drum and put it to the corner of the house, catch rainwater to help with the washing. And I've seen some get the ditch, the pretty water in the ditch, they wash with the water out the ditch. Oh no, we didn't have no electricity, we used to have lamp. And you wash your lampshade and you keep the lamp, and it was a wick in the lamp, and you keep that trim. But you used to go to the store, you have a can, a gallon can or 2-gallon can and buy your kerosene, but you would keep those lamps filled. I remember during that time when my uncle was that mechanic. He had something rigged in the house where he could have get electricity. It was something connected in one, the living room was electric light. But that was something from a battery or something he had connected. But he knew what to do, but we didn't have no electric light. It was lamp light. You keep your wick trim and your lamp full of oil. People, the woods, people used to bring the wood on their head from out the woods. Your Christmas tree used to come from out the wood. I remember when Front Street Ed was there, and where Belle's now, Belle's didn't be on that side. Belle was on this other side. Like you going down Front Street, Belle's was on the right, Sayers was on the right, Tomlinson, Fogel, Steele and Moses, and all of those stores. And I remember where the market clock was, it used to be, the police department used to be there at one point. And then it's right up in that nook just before you get to the market clock. It seemed like some people just opened. There was somebody called Nimmer Joseph, and it seemed like Mr. Marcus Richardson had a shoe shop on Front Street. This birthday here, I had this 100th birthday. I've been having birthday before that. My family, each March, my family would see that. Now, on the Gardner side, they would see that well, they didn't say a party, but it would be 10, 15 or more of them together, and they would take me out to eat someplace. And we would, and then the next 2 weeks, if it don't be the next 2 weeks, we might be 3 weeks, but the end of March, another set of family. I call them, I would say, the Izard, but that Izard consists of Johnson. Lily Jean Johnson and her sister, they would take me out. And after her 2 sisters that was living in New York retired, then they start joining in. So I would go out twice in March. My family, they didn't let a birthday pass. They would always see that I go someplace, and we went to different places. But now, this 100th birthday, when we had the other thing, Margie, was my 90th? The 90th, that was something.